Okay, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be looking at one of the hardest Christian passages in the Bible. And specifically today, it is to Christians. The lost, you don't know Jesus, I suggest you get on board, because the ride is going to get a lot rougher than anything you can ever imagine. Let's start. John 16. This is a springboard verse. It's not the topic, but it's going to lead into the topic. John chapter 16, verse 33. This is Jesus speaking. And in John 16:33, he says, "These things have I spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." Jesus, he always told it like it is. I've said this before, and I'll probably say it again. I always used to get mad at preachers when I would hear them say something to the effect, "Give your heart to Jesus and everything will be okay. Give your life to Jesus and nothing bad will ever happen to you. Trust in the Lord and you'll get everything that you want in life." And I, as a young Christian, I knew the Bible well enough to know that that's stupid. That for all intents and purposes, if you're on Satan's team as such, you're not going to get hassled so much until you leave his team and go to the Lord's side. At that point, you're going to start to get hammered. And so young Christians, they have this appeal, oh, come to Jesus and everything's going to be okay. Come to the Lord and everything's going to work out fine. Then they commit their lives to the Lord. They get saved, they get born again, and then all hell breaks loose in their lives. And I say, what happened here? The preacher told me everything's going to be okay. Jesus makes it very, very clear. In the world, here, as we're living in the world, ye shall have tribulation. But be of good cheer. I, Jesus, have overcome the world. The main text, Romans chapter 8. This is probably the second most popular verse that Christians know any place in the Bible. I would say John 3:16 would be the first. This would be the second. Every Christian knows John 3:16, for God so loved the world. And every Christian basically knows this verse right here. Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. This is one of the hardest verses to experientially understand and get of anything written in this book, because it is so counterintuitive to everything that we know, everything that we experience, everything that we go through, screams out and says, that makes no sense at all. All things work together for good? Are you mad? Are you nuts? And yet, there it is. And I'll tell you right up front, if you're looking for a definitive answer on this thing from me, I don't have one. I've been a Christian almost 60 years now. I've been through this Bible a whole lot of times. I can get fairly close, maybe. I can do some things that in my heart that I can get through this thing, but to be able to explain it in every situation that you might be going through, everything that you might experience, that your life, things that you've gone through, I can't explain it. I can sympathize, I can empathize, but I can't give you a definitive answer. For we know. We do? I mean, that's the first thing going out the gate right there. The verse says, for we know that all things. Well, we don't always know that. So what does the verse say? Well, first of all, the verse does say, for we know that all things work together for good. And going out the gate, the first three words, for we know, that lets almost everybody get off the bus on that one. We don't know. We're supposed to know. He makes it available or makes it possible that we can know. But we get so wrapped up in the world around us. We get so wrapped up in the things around us that are happening to us and those that we love, that we're blinded to this thing. And then it gets worse from there. For we know, yeah, that's tough. All things. And I can hear the crowd right now. What are you talking about? All things work together for good. You trying to tell me that sickness, disease, cancer, heart trouble, kidney trouble, all these things work together for good? My husband or wife or spouse, they step out on me and they cross a line. That's good. Trouble with my kids. That's good. I mean, we got a million reasons. That's why I say this verse is so counterintuitive. It just doesn't make sense to us on the surface. For we know that all things, and boy, that all things, that means all things work together for good to them that love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. Then we get down to that last little part, the called according to his purpose. And we say, well, there you go. I'm not called necessarily. I'm a housewife, or I'm a factory worker, or I'm a salesman, or I'm, whatever it happens to be. I'm not called. And we have that fixation in our mind that the only people called are like pastors or preachers or teachers or missionaries or evangelists and so forth. Every Christian's called. I don't care if you're the housewife, the student, the factory worker, the farmer, it doesn't make any difference. We're all called. You might not be called to preach in a big auditorium or a church, but you're called. And your calling might be just to talk to that factory worker, that assembly line guy next to you, or that salesman that you see at 8 o'clock in the morning before you all split and go your separate ways. Or that next door housewife that you have coffee with, every morning or so. We are called. Look at verse 29 for a second, because I want to get this out of the way right now about the calling. Because I know some of you are saying, I'm not called to preach. I'm not called to teach. I'm not called to do this, that, or the other thing. So this verse doesn't apply to me. But we're saying, yes, it does apply to you because you are called. Verse 29. For whom he did foreknow. This is God speaking. For whom he did foreknow. And the foreknow is part of his job description. He wouldn't be God if he didn't foreknow everything that was going to happen. So he knew. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate. He didn't predestinate you based on just your good looks. He didn't predestinate you on the fact that he wanted you to do this, that, or the other thing. He predestinated you on the basis of foreknowing that you would accept his son. So for whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, remember that was based on foreknowledge, then he also called. So he's not talking to missionaries, he's not talking to pastors, he's not talking to preachers only, he's talking to everybody, which includes both you and I. So what does the verse not say? We know what it did say, for we know, and we have a problem with that one. All things, we really have a problem with that one because they are so counterintuitive. All things work together for good. That doesn't make any sense to us. How can the death of a little baby work together for good? How can a young boy, 8, 9 years old, he dives off of a stupid platform or jumps into a lake and he snaps his neck and he's paralyzed for the next 70 years? How can that work together for good? That's why I say at the beginning, this is so counterintuitive, because everybody in the sound of my voice has an example of something that's happened in their lives or to someone that they love in their lives that they can't understand, that it doesn't make any sense to them. And so when we run into a verse like this, it smacks us right up the side of the head. And our initial knee-jerk reaction is, this verse doesn't make any sense. All things work together for good? Well, what the verse does not say, it does not say that only the good things work together for good. I mean, if I won the lottery today, my first knee-jerk reaction would be, hey, that's a good thing. I don't have to worry about money anymore. I don't have to worry about, the rest of my old age anymore. I don't have to worry about what the economy does or any of this stuff. That would seem to be a good thing. So I could check that on the good column. But if I go into the doctor next week and he says, gee whiz, your stage 3 kidney thing just slipped into a stage 4, and before you know it, you're going to be on dialysis. Let's mark that in the bad column. God doesn't see life like that. We do, but he doesn't. Well, the verse does not say that only the things that we understand work together for good. Like I've said, I don't understand how somebody can be paralyzed and that work together for good. I don't understand how the death of a family, especially a young person, little baby or something, I don't understand how that can work for good. A relationship gone bad, a marriage split, I don't see how that can work for good. That's why I said at the beginning of this message, I don't have a definitive answer that you may be looking for. So what do? We have to trust in God. Remember, he said the first verse that we mentioned today, in the world ye shall have tribulation. Oh, bummer, downer, depressing. Gee whiz, what do I do now? He says, but be of good cheer. Oh, there's an upside here. He said, because I, Jesus, have overcome the world. So we know how it's going to end. We've read the end of the book. We know that we're going to go to heaven. And we know that once we're in heaven, that cancer is not going to make any difference anymore. That kidney disease is not going to make any difference anymore. That arthritic pain and so forth that we live with constantly, it's not going to make any difference anymore. We kind of get that. It's just this interim that we're worried about. It's where we live today that throws us off. The verse does not say also that all things are good. It says all things work together for good. So I'm not trying to say that cancer is good. I'm not saying the death of a little baby is good. That relationships that go bad are good, that they're not good. It says that they work together for good. This is where God's prerogative of being God comes into play. He can take a bad thing and make a good thing out of it. One of the hardest things for us to understand and to get is a verse like this, because it is one of the greatest promises in all this book. I mean, almost the greatest promise in all this book, in this entire book. You know why? Because it is unconditional. A lot of promises have conditions to them. If you do this, I will do that. If you do this, I'll do that. A lot of promises are like that. But this one, it is unconditional. It's not based on anything you do. It's not based on anything that you understand. It's not based on anything that you've learned from experience. It's not anything, it's not any of these things. It is an unconditional promise. All things, we know, he says, all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. A couple of examples. John chapter 9. John chapter 9. Jesus is going to the temple one day, and he walks by a bunch of guys, beginning at verse 1 here. And as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from birth. Birth. So that this guy had no concept of what sight was like, what it was to see. And I know the old adage, well, what you don't know doesn't hurt you type thing, but here it is. He was blind from birth. Didn't understand the concept of a beautiful woman or a rose or a sunset or the water glistening off or the sunlight glistening off water, any of these things. He had no concept of this stuff. So as Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from birth, from his birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? You have to remember the culture in which this was written. It as a general rule, not a total rule, not a complete rule, but as a general rule, if you were blessed materially, physically, emotionally and so forth, it usually meant that God was on your side. If you were suffering, if you were a beggar, if you were lame, if you were a leper, if you were, some other thing, then generally it was assumed that this was a punishment from God. So the guys saw this guy sitting there, blind from birth. So they asked Jesus, well, who sinned here? The guy's parents? That now they make the kid blind just to get back in them? Or did this guy in and of himself, did he sin? to get himself blind. But remember, he's blind from birth. Verse 3, Jesus answered, neither has this man sinned, nor his parents. But, now here's, the guy's blind all of his life. But that the works of God should be made manifest in him. The works of God. What is he talking about, the works of God? Well, number one, the healing of his blindness. Jesus walks by, he sees a blind guy. Jesus heals the blind guy. People get to see the miracle. They get to see sight restored to this guy. They watch the guy's reaction. And God gets the glory. But then you ask yourself, why did the guy have to go all of his life in a blind condition so that Jesus could have 8 seconds or so of glory here? Oh, be healed. Here's your sight, and the guy sees, and everybody oohs and ahs. Are you trying to tell me that Jesus couldn't have picked some guy who just maybe had an industrial accident last week or got kicked in the head by a horse or something and he lost his eyesight, that he couldn't have healed him? That he had to pick some guy who was blind from birth? Yeah, he's God. He's going to get glory. He got glory that day. Now, 15 minutes after that guy got healed and his sight was restored, do you think that he just sat around for the next 50 years blaming God, saying, why did you wait so long? That's why I say, once we get to heaven, that cancer you've got, that arthritis you've got, that broken marriage that you went through, the disappointment you had in your kids, I mean, to fill in the blank, 15 minutes after you get in heaven, none of it's going to matter. And yet we are consumed down here with these things. John chapter 15. There's another hard one that a lot of Christians don't really intuitively get, myself included. John chapter 15, look at verse 2. Jesus is making a point here. He says, every branch in me, he's likening himself to the main trunk of the tree. And you got all the various branches going out from the tree. And everybody knows that all the branches and the twigs and the leaves and so forth all get their nourishment basically from the trunk, which has the roots going into the ground. So that's the analogy he's making here. I'm the trunk, you're the branches. Okay. Every branch in me that beareth not fruit, he taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, he purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. Anybody who's ever grown roses or flowers or whatever it happens to be, you know that after the roses have bloomed and after they're done and they're wilted and they're dying and so forth, that you then, if you want a good set of roses next year, you have to prune that rose bush. Pruning means you have to cut off the branches. And again, counterintuitively, you don't just snip off the little tips of these things. To prune them correctly, you have to go down almost to the root and start whacking and cutting on this stuff. So that the next year comes along, boom, they're going to be bigger and better than before. So he says, I purge you, I snip you, I cut you, I hurt you in that sense. Why? Just because I get off on it? Because it makes me feel good? That it makes me feel powerful? No, that ye may bring forth more fruit. Sometimes God has to get our attention. And depending on who we are and what our psychological makeup is and our temperament and so forth, he has to use different means for different people to get their attention. And some people, it has to be a tough lesson. It has to be tough love. So he lets a guy go his whole life blind so that God can get the glory. Do you think, again, going back to that poor blind guy, do you think 15 minutes after he had his sight restored, that he was bitching and griping? This guy made it into the pages of this book. Now, he didn't know that at the time, but we know subsequently that he did. What would you give? What would you put up with? What would you endure or go through if you knew that you were going to be a verse in this Bible? I'd give anything I had for it. And I don't think that guy felt mad or angry at all. Jesus said, look, I want to get fruit out of you. And if the only way I can get fruit out of you is to prune you back every year, to chop you off and so forth, and make you start all over again, I'm going to do it. John chapter 11. John chapter 11. There's a point where one of Jesus' best friends, this guy named Lazarus, and he died. Lazarus had two sisters, Mary and Martha. As soon as Lazarus got really, really sick, they sent word to Jesus, Mary and Martha did, so that he could come, that they knew he could heal. They knew he could do all these great things. They knew he could raise people from the dead and so forth. So as soon as their brother got really, really sick, they sent word to Jesus. But Jesus didn't come. He stayed where he was for an extra 3 days. By then, Lazarus had died. By the time Jesus got there, he had been dead for 4 days. Decomposition had set in. I mean, his flesh is starting to disintegrate. The worms are in there. He's stinking to high heaven. And Jesus comes walking up the road. Mary and Martha see him. And they rush up to him. And the first thing they say is, had you been here, my brother, our brother, would not have died. But he wasn't there in time. Verse 4. John 11, verse 4. When Jesus heard that, about Lazarus being sick and so forth, when Jesus heard that, he said, this sickness is not unto death. Now we see death entirely different than God sees it. Jesus, all his ministry, he referred to death as sleeping. I mean, the body's dead, but from his standpoint, it is sleeping because he can raise it, boom, like that. In the resurrection, boom, we're all going to go up. So death is not a finality in his mind. It is for us, from our perspective, but not from his. So he said, this sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be, what do we got here? Glorified thereby. Are you joking me again? This is the same type of thing about the blind guy. That the power of God might be revealed, that the power of God might be, glorified here. You mean to tell me that he let Lazarus die so that the Son of Man might be glorified? Yeah. Because once again, now Jesus gets to show that he is the Son of God. Now he gets to show that he is the Messiah. Now he gets to show that he has the power of death in his hands. Like he says in Revelation, I have the keys of hell and of death. So Lazarus had to go through this. Wasn't pleasant for him, I'm sure. Mary and Martha were, tearing their hair out. They were all bummed out that their brother had died, knowing that had Jesus got there sooner, they could have avoided it. And so Jesus says, hey, yeah, I let him die so that I could be glorified. We got to get the pecking order straight here, folks. God does not run this universe based on our wants, our desires, our talents, our hopes, our wishes, our dreams. He runs it on his. Now, look in chapter 12 of John to show you how I'm going to end this one up here a little bit. That's how God works. John chapter 12, verse 9. John 12, 9. A little bit later, much people of the Jews therefore knew that he was there, talking about Jesus. Jesus had come someplace. He was with Lazarus again. Lazarus has been resurrected. Lazarus is just, like a newborn babe, as it were, physically. No problems, no hint of decomp. He's not stinking and any of this stuff. He hasn't had an arm fall off or a nose fall off. He is in perfect shape, and him and Jesus are having dinner one day. Much people of the Jews, therefore, knew that he was there. And now watch this. This is amazing. And they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. Remember our primary passage. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Jesus allows Lazarus to die so that he can make a point. He raises Lazarus from the dead. And now Lazarus has a rep going through the rest of his life. And that being, this is the guy that Jesus rose from the dead. So when Jesus was having lunch with him one day, they came not to see Jesus only, but to see Lazarus. So you think God didn't get some glory out of this thing? You didn't think he didn't milk this as it went by? Every time Lazarus went someplace, every time he spoke to someone, every time anybody saw him, the first thing in their mind was they're looking at some guy who was literally dead for 4 days. What kind of glory do you think God got from that? All things work together for good. The death of Lazarus, it worked together for good. Didn't say that it was good. It worked together for good. The stoning of Stephen. Here you got a young preacher boy. He's on fire for God. He's got it together emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. He's on his way up. He's a go-getter. He confronts the Sanhedrin. He confronts the Pharisees. He tells them the way it is. He gets up there and he does a whole entire chapter of a diatribe against these guys and why they should accept Jesus as their Savior, why they crucified the Son of God, why they rejected their Messiah. He had everything going for him. How many souls would his ministry have affected? How many churches would he have been able to form and start in his lifetime? How many missionary journeys would he have been able to accomplish? How many sermons and lessons would he be able to teach in a lifetime? And yet, at the very, very beginning of his ministry, everything going for him, God allows him to get killed, just like that, going out the gate. We don't know if he ever started one church. We don't know that he ever did preach any other message. We don't know that if he ever led anybody else to the Lord. But here was a promising, potentially bombshell of a guy who could have done anything he wanted for God. And God snuffed him out. And everybody says, are you trying to tell me that worked for good? Well, there is one little addendum to this story. In the crowd of those people who were stoning Stephen, there was one young man there. Acts chapter 8. Acts chapter 8. Stephen got to a point in his sermon that these guys listening to it, they just went apoplectic. They couldn't find the rocks fast enough to stone this guy. And one of the young guys standing there said, look, hey guys, I'll watch your coats for you. I'll watch your, wallets for you. Acts chapter 8, verse 1. And Saul, who would later become known as Paul, and Saul was consenting unto his death. Paul was egging him on. Go for it, guys. I can't stand them either. Kill him. Kill him. So Stephen, a young man on fire for God, all the potential in the world, he gets snuffed out at an early age. Are you trying to tell me all things work together for good? Yep. Because out of that experience came the conversion of probably the greatest Christian outside of Jesus Christ who ever walked the face of this earth, the Apostle Paul. And what did it cost him? It cost him the death of Stephen. 15 minutes after Stephen croaked. Do you think he was bitching and griping to God? Oh, I could have done this. Oh, I could have been somebody. Oh, I could have done this for you, Lord. I could have done that for you, Lord. You think that was it? Or did he look down and see what Jesus saw? And Jesus nudges him and says, hey, you see that guy down there? He's going to revolutionize the world for me. Well, we can understand to a certain extent why Paul got to a point in his life that he could say something to the effect, I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. He says, if I have a lot, I don't really care. If I don't have anything, I don't really care. Because at the end of the day, is not what happens to me in this world, or how much it happens to me in this world, or what I don't have in this world. At the end of the day, I'm going to spend an eternity with God in heaven. So if I have to go through junk this long, this much, this far, so that I can have an eternity with Jesus this far, wonder if I can make that choice. You see, we don't see it from the same perspective God sees it. We see our lives right here and the things that happen to us right here. We see that as the end all and the be all. That's all there is as far as we're concerned. If we're in pain, that's it. That's all we focus on. If we have broken dreams that we never fulfilled in life, that's all we focus on. If we have regrets for a life of, wasted junk, divorce, estrangement from kids, and fill in the blank, that's all we focus on. And God sees an eternity out there, 1 trillion times longer than what we've experienced here. But we don't get it. Jesus tells us, I will never leave you nor forsake you. What does that mean? I'll never leave. Big deal, we say. Well, yeah, it is a big deal. Do you think the 3 Hebrew kids, those boys, were appreciative of the fact that Jesus was in that fire with them? That saved their butts. Do you think Daniel was appreciative of the fact that Jesus was with him in that lion's den? There's a million instances in this book where people have gone through trials and tribulations that they wouldn't have made it other than the fact that Jesus was with them. It's an amazing God that we serve from this standpoint. He can take anything and he can turn it into good. We can't. If I have a glass of pure water here and I add a drop of ink to it, let's say, that drop of ink is going to dissipate through that entire water, and it's going to turn the whole glass of water grayish, depending on how much ink I put in. But all the water is going to be contaminated with that ink. There's certain things we can do. There's certain things we can't do. I can't control the sunrise or the sunset. I can't control the molecular structure of my body, how it's going to interact with each other. God can take anything, good or bad. The decomposition of a body, he can turn it into good. The stoning and the death of a body, he can turn it into good. A blind man, he can turn it into good. It's amazing. I can only get something good out of something good. I don't have the capacity or the brains or the intelligence to take a bunch of bad things and turn them into good. But my God can. That's why he says, trust in me. Don't trust in yourself. I think probably the only way I can sum this up, because I'm floundering at this point. I'm just as lost as everybody else here on this thing. Experientially, I know things because I've lived them. I've experienced them. They're part of my experience. They're part of me. They're part of what make me what I am. But at the same time, there's a whole world going on around me that I have no concept of. There's a spiritual world. I mean, I put my hand like this. I'm in that spiritual world. I can't see it, feel it, hear it, sense it. It's there, though, right there. But I'm on one plane and it's on a different plane. So if I'm trying to sum this whole thing, I'll end with this. Romans chapter 8, again, we're going to go back to the same chapter that we started with. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. For I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy of the glory that should be revealed in us. That's about as clear as I can get it. I reckon, or I understand, or I accept, or I kind of get. I reckon that the sufferings, fill in that blank. A marriage gone wrong, kids gone wrong, health shot, dreams squashed, paralysis, cancer, COVID, whatever. I reckon that the sufferings of this present time what? They're going to debilitate us. That's the end of us. Oh, that proves that God doesn't love us. Oh, that proves that we're not good enough for God. Oh, that proves that God is angry with us. Oh, that proves that God is finished with us. Oh, that proves that God doesn't have anything for us to do. No, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which should be revealed in us. Us, not the glory that should be revealed in the sunset or the face of the baby or the flower. No, no, no. The glory which should be revealed in us, you and me. And that's the best I can do. And you're going to have to go to God on your own behalf. The life in which you live, where you are. And if you've got problems, or if you've got concerns, or if you've got gripes or bitches about the way God's doing things, then you take it up with him. But just remember that whatever God allows you, or makes you, or forces you, or watches you go through in this world, that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy. Why? Because we know. You see, we started out with for I reckon. In verse 18, we get to verse 28. For I know. You see the transition from reckoning to knowing. For we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Father, these are some of the hardest verses in the world for us to understand and to get. As I mentioned before in the message, they are so counterintuitive. They make no sense. We can't wrap our heads around these things. We understand. I mean, we're sentient human beings. And those of us who are adults, we get what kind of, is good or bad. We can make that distinction. And yet, we don't really get good or bad. We're stuck in that mode where we think we know what we want. We know what we like. We know what comes easy for us. We know these types of things. But Lord, we don't really get how we get from this to glory. And that's where the counterintuitive thing it falls apart for us. But you, Lord, you are so incredible. You are so majestic. You are so awe-inspiring that you can take anything, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, and you can form it and make it and shape it into something great. It's just amazing. And you're the one that you've asked for us to believe in, to trust in. And yet, oh Lord, we have so hard of a time with that, to trust you. If I had a burning furnace right now and someone says, well, go on in, the Lord will meet you on the inside. But Lord, I've got a problem. I don't want to step in that furnace. Because my mind, my flesh, my soul, my being, everything screams within me, no, it's going to hurt. And yet you've proven you can meet us inside that furnace. I don't want to go in that lion's den. I don't want to stand there and be stoned and have rocks hit me and feel that pain. And then maybe that numbness, and then that oblivion, and then that blackness. I don't want to go through that. And yet, Lord, you've said, hey, I'll make something good out of it. Lord, help us, please. We got so much of ourselves in the way of ourselves that it's just ridiculous. We've taken Christianity, we've turned it on its head. We've flipped it upside down. We turned it inside out. We base our lives on the fact of what we want for us. We come to you in prayer, Lord, and say, oh, give me this, give me that, give me this, give me that. Help me here and help me there. And you, as the adult in the room, you look down and say, no, what you really need is this. I know you want that, but you really need this. And so he throws in a verse. My God shall supply all your need according to his riches and glory. Lord, that's another toughie. Because for some of us, you've deemed that, yeah, we do need cancer. Yeah, some of us, we do need problems in our families. We do need problems with our workers. We do need problems for this. Why? Who knows why, Lord? And that's the thrust of this whole thing. We don't usually get it because we're so consumed with what we want. We can't see the forest for the trees. And so the prayer today, Lord, to help us to get through this, help us to grow, help us to get it. Stephen got it at the tail end. As the rocks were raining down on him, he got it. The 3 Hebrew kids in the furnace, they got it. Daniel in the lions, and he got it. Lord, help us to get it. Help us to remember, Father, that all things work together for good. That I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which should be revealed in us. Lord, I thank you. In Jesus' name.